Welcome back to another Supercoach video with me, JD. You are joining me for the round 2 review of the season, and it is, of course, the most important round of the season, I'd say, really, apart from actually setting your team. This is where you get to fix your mistakes and really set yourself up for the rest of the year. So it's going to be a pretty big episode, I think, and there's a lot to cover. So I'll go through my team and an update of where it's at. My biggest mistake from the preseason, I'll let you in on that little secret, why this year has felt so hard compared to other years. A lot of people's teams seem pretty good, but haven't scored well. So why is that? Who are the trade-in targets for the week? Who can you trade out? What trades should you do? And then we'll go quick fire game-by-game reviews and then my trades this week, as well as how I plan to set up my team. So a lot to cover. We'll try and get through it pretty quickly, but also in depth. I don't know. I reckon we'll go for about an hour, but we'll see how we go. So I scored 23.82, which is a little bit over 100-point improvement on last week. It was good. We had some of the premiums bounce back. I'm up to 14 or just inside the top 15,000 overall. Once again, overall rank doesn't matter a ton at this point in the year. We're just really setting up the team to make sure it's ready for the rest of the year. I did make 2 trades last week, last minute, and I'll go through wine a little bit later when we get to my actual trades, but effectively I went early on both Martin and Hayes. I thought the job security was good enough that I could trade them in early and hopefully not get bitten by it. And I think Hayes backed up with a pretty good performance against Freo. And Martin obviously had the COVID problem that he's going to be straight back in this week, especially after another pretty poor Essendon effort for 3 quarters. So yeah, I really did that because I needed the money and I wanted to make sure I had flexibility with my trades this week without being forced into using a boost if I didn't have to. So just quickly going down back, we had Crisp and Ridley both bounce back from poor performances last week. Crisp in particular had a really nice score. It could have been even better if he didn't butcher the ball so badly, but it is what it is. You take 121. The average still looks awful for both of them, but yeah, they turned up, which is great. Dawson, 99. He had another game where his first quarter he scored nothing and then he did 100 points in the other 3. So he's going to have a game where he strings it all together and go 110, 120. It's coming soon. I can feel, although I believe the Crows run gets quite tricky from here. So I don't know, maybe I'll be waiting on that one for a little bit. But yeah, he had 5 clangers in the first quarter, which completely messed his score. And then he came back from that point. So Short, yeah, he was nutso. Like, I don't know, he must have a record for scoring from kick-ins that just went bonkers. And then Whitfield was pretty poor again as well. I'm not entirely sure what's going on here because on one hand, you have him saying that it's the fittest he's ever been through the preseason and he's in great condition, great nick. And then you see him hunched over after efforts in the 4th quarter. And I was a little bit in and out for this game. It's actually quite frustrating because GWS games are the ones that have been interrupted for me both of the last 2 weeks. So I only saw bits of the first quarter and then the last quarter, and I didn't see a whole bunch in the middle. His dream team score, his fantasy score was 88, which isn't too bad. Normally he goes 1 for 1 if you look at his history. So if he got an 88 in that format, you'd expect around that in Supercoach as well. And that would have been disappointing, but not awful. So like a 70 and a 73 for his first 2 scores is not great. We did expect to pick him as a premium. And then I made the right call with Hinge over McCartan. I was actually tossing up back and forth on this one, and it didn't really matter in the end. It was only a 4-point difference, but yeah, started Hinge. And then in the midfield, McRae and Took Miller were just amazing. Neil, 198 captain, boom. For those that joined on the live stream, the Dunkley Neil strategy was the one that I went for. And for those that don't understand why, effectively, Neil's last 3 games against Essendon were a 140, a 157, a 157, I believe. And he got 8 of the 9 Brownlow votes. So I wanted to make sure that my vice captain either had a really high ceiling or really large variance. So high ceiling or an easy score to pass on. And that's exactly what I got in Dunkley. He had an easy score to pass on straight to Neil and then gobbled up that 198, which was much better than what I expected. And for those that went the McRae route, which I saw as a little bit safer, I mean, you got really unlucky because a 142 is a great vice captain score any other week of the year. But yeah, just this week lost out 56 points, which is yeah crazy. Very fortunate for me. So take that. It definitely has helped prop up my weekly score because there were some things that went wrong for me, like not having Brody having McGovern, for example, in the forward line. Rao came back to earth this week a little bit with a 71. He had something like 45 points, I want to say, in the first. I think it was 40. He was on 40 at quarter time and then just the 30 for the rest of the game. People were saying he was tagging and doing that type of stuff. I didn't really see him as like, I mean, he was maybe doing some defensive stuff at some of the stoppages, but it's not like he was hard tagging. And then they were putting him up at half forward at points, which I thought was a bit weird. So I'm not really sure what happened here and why Rao was using that way. I guess the solace I take out of it is that Melbourne is probably one of the better contested teams in the competition, especially in the midfield with Gawn, Oliver, Petrarca, and then you've got people like Viney coming through there as well. So that's going to be one of the harder matchups for Rao, just if you think about how he wins the ball, which is in and under at those stoppages. I don't think he's going to have as many problems like that against other teams. So still very optimistic, and obviously a 114 average for a 340k price player is great. But yeah, like not the best game. And then Berry a 76. He after about 5 minutes into the second quarter, he basically tagged Merritt for the rest of the game. That was the plan, and he actually scored okay doing it. I think Merritt led him to the ball and getting into it a lot when he maybe otherwise wouldn't have as much. So yeah, not a bad thing for him. I think like this average is okay for his price. It's just we've had so many other players do so good that while this would normally be okay for this price player, it just feels a little bit off this week. But yeah, I mean, like he's tracking okay. Horn Francis was great, and 98 is amazing. Definitely got that cash gen going. Day costs, back to earth a little bit this week with the 53. I thought he was still okay though, but yeah, like just not as much possession. And then Rochelle, yeah, same thing again, like off the highs of last week, back to a score that we would expect a little bit more for a rookie. And unfortunately, because I went to get Hayes and Martin this week, I didn't have Owens for the loophole, so I couldn't take Stevens 95, which is a bit unfortunate. I know I dropped like 40 points here compared to a lot of other people, but it does set me up for the rest of the year, which is great. And then Ward, he had like a big fantasy score again, and just butchered it from a Supercoach perspective. And then I thought McDonald was right. Given the Hawks have won, they need to blood the youth. They both kicked goals. I think their job security continues to be okay, even though their scoring hasn't been amazing, but you just let them tick along. And then, as you saw from the start of this vid, I was at the Swans game, got to watch Buddy kick his 1000s, which was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Like, I'm so fortunate that Pistol from Dr. Supercoach had a spare ticket and invited me, and I could go. Like, it was so fluky, the long story on how that happened. And yeah, amazing. And then Stevens, I mean, I always joke that with the Swans, it's hard because Stevens, Warner, Heaney, they all look the same. But yeah, Stevens was really good. I really liked what he did on the wing, worked very hard. I think we're going to have more good scores come from him, even though they have a tough matchup this week in the Dogs. In the rucks, Grundy 101, Witts the 75. He was actually on track for a much better score than that, but dropped off. But given how Darcy's injured and Gawn has put up another poor performance, I don't think I can complain with Witts' 2 scores at all so far. Dixon obviously missed with the COVID protocol, so hopefully back this week, but a bit hard to know if they're going to run Dixon and Kennedy and Darling. So I guess that's a wait and see. This is a chance it becomes loophole. And the forward line, Dunkley was good. I mean, outside of Whitfield, Dunkley was my poorest scoring primo at 97. And then, yeah, Butters was great. Cogs was pretty good. Still not sure if he's going to be a keeper, but he's going to be one of those that you can keep right until the end and then decide to trade out. McGov was not good. Not good at all. I mean, he had some clangers from drop marks. His kick-ins were a little bit down on last week, but most importantly, his role looked much worse. I'll show, I think, just a still image on screen at this point because I don't want to get copyrighted or flagged or anything like that. But effectively, it's going to try and highlight the big problem with McGovern, which is how he was used in this game. He was on Ugelhagen for a lot of this. And when it came to rebounding out of defense, they would have McGovern push up to the 50 arc and then sit basically right in the middle, in the center of the ground. And that meant that anytime Carlton switched play across the back half, it wasn't going to McGovern. If they were exiting out one side, it wasn't going to McGovern. They just don't use the inside corridor as their way of attacking and rebounding, which means McGovern was standing in a place that he doesn't get used. And that is the biggest reason why his score dropped off from last week to this week. Now, he can still have big games and still make money. And he isn't, like, I don't know if he's a must trade if you've got bigger problems or anything like that. And we'll go into this in a little bit. But yeah, that's pretty worrying for me. I think we're going to see quite high variance with McGovern now, where we thought there might have been a relatively safe floor. I just think that's gone because he's not getting the cheap kicks through the back line anymore. Cherry 120, one that I was on pretty big in the preseason. I'm glad that is paying off. He is going to have one of the lowest break-evens, no doubt, at his price, 208k, 120 in the rolling average for a couple of weeks, and looking pretty good, I think, as North's number one ruck. And then, yeah, Hayes, as I quickly mentioned, backed up, I think, a really, really, maybe best on ground effort last week with a good performance this week. And yeah, 68 on ground from a rookie, nothing to sneeze at. The big watch, wait and see. And for those that weren't forced to trading in Hayes last week, the thing that gives you guys a leg up is Ryder returned through the VFL successfully. I think he had something like, I want to say, oh no, I had the numbers. Now I'm going to make them up. But he played pretty well and he looks ready to come back to AFL. So the question here is, can they run Hayes, Marshall and Ryder in one team, or does Hayes get dropped? I could be in a bit of trouble here if Hayes and Dixon both get dropped. Durden, a pretty poor 24. Once again, I think his job security is still pretty good, but playing at small forward role, there is prone to some up and downs. They play the Hawks this week, who have been surprisingly good through the first 2 weeks. Definitely surprised me. That is not a prediction that I had, that Hawks, Carlton and Collingwood would all be undefeated. Like, there's no way I would have predicted that 2 rounds in. So yeah, maybe some goals coming his way soon. And then, yeah, Nick Martin, as we mentioned, quickly coming back. So this is the team overall. It is looking okay, but yeah, I guess like the biggest mistake I made from the preseason, and the person I need to apologize to most, is Paddy Cripps. I was a big doubter this preseason. It was on many of my do not start lists, and while those lists were mostly right most of the time, after 2 rounds in, it is so far, yeah, it was my worst call. So yeah, apologies to Cripps, and he's like fairly highly owned. I think it's more the casual community than the serious community that owns him, but it is a big problem for me and many others at the moment. He's gone massive for his price. So yeah, not good. All right. So why has this year felt so hard to other years? And this is something I was thinking about this week, because when I look at my team, I don't see a bad team. And in fact, I went and checked compared to last year. So last year, after 2 rounds, I was ranked in the top 800, barely. And I'd scored an overall total of 4,469 points through 2 weeks. Now, if I look at my total score 2 weeks in, I am 4,662. So that's 193 points if I did that math right. So that's 193 points better in total through the first 2 weeks. But instead of being top 1,000, top 800, I'm just in the top 15,000. And so I asked, like, why? Like, this week, apart from Whitfield scoring 70, basically all my other primos turned up, and some of them went really large. I mean, I had a Neil 198 captain. That's massive. So why has it felt so hard? And I think this is something that I've seen through a lot of the popular content creators as well. They're a little bit further off the pace than we have been the last couple of years. And I think the big reason why is that the strategy that's worked most for Supercoach tends to be a more risk-averse playstyle. The guns and rookies playstyle, quite risk-averse, and this is tried and tested, what has worked. Even with that strategy, like in a normal season, you kind of start off slow, and then you have the cash gen, you build that up, and you kind of come home with like a gust of wind behind you and really overtake some of those teams that might have started strong but then burnt out. But this year, we've just seen that that there's just so many value picks that have worked out through the first 2 rounds, and not just worked out, but been unbelievably good. So Cripps, Heaney, I mean, some of the ones in my forward line here, like Cherry, Cogs, Brody, who I don't have, Rao's been good for 2 weeks. And I think like this is really bit a lot of us that are more serious in the butt so far, because that more mid-price, aggressive mid-price strategy, which is fun, but generally not how you win overall, doesn't pay off in general. But this year has done so through 2 weeks massively. And so that's why I can use kind of a similar strategy to the previous 2 years, be 200 points ahead of where I would normally be and still be behind on the overall ranks. And that's really tough. And so the big question is, do I need to adjust and make my team more mid-pricer friendly, or do I just stick the tried and tested path and continue on with what I've got? That's a question I'm still tossing up. But yeah, I think that's like just my quick reflection, which is the normal risk-averse strategies that we use just haven't worked out as well this year. And I don't know if that is something that's going to continue or if it's going to regress or what's going to happen. But yeah, I guess like that's what I'm weighing up. And it is probably something good to keep in your mind as we start to transition into who are the trade-in targets for this week, who should you be going after. And I think the most important thing to keep in mind when we look at this is that you want to be securing your cash generation for the rest of the year. That is the most important thing. If you don't have your cash generation going, you can't upgrade your team enough later on, you're going to struggle. So when I'm thinking about my team this week, I'm firstly going, do I have all the, important cash generating rookies or options so that my team's set up for the future? And then if I need to make any corrections, I'll do it after that. And the players I'm trying to correct to are either going to also make me lots of money or be keepers, or preferably both. So that's how I'm thinking about it. So that means, if I look at some of these players, I know like Dill Stevens was 30% owned, I think, last week, but he has got a 95 in his system for the next 2 weeks, 167K. I don't think there's anyone priced that low that has that good of a rolling, like a week 2 score in his rolling average. This is someone that I would be prioritizing even over some of the other mid-price or premium options that people are getting excited about, like Heaney, Brody, Cherry, etc. Or maybe not Cherry, but yeah, like definitely over Brody or Heaney or like a Hewitt or a Cripps. I would be prioritizing the rookies that you need to have in your side. So if you don't have Hayes I think is a must-have as long as he plays another game. Cherry is really important. Rochelle, I'm not so sure on, just because it's a small forward and Adelaide's run, I think after the week they just had, is quite hard for the next few weeks. Like it's pretty easy to see him not scoring well. So if you couldn't get him, I don't think that's the end of the world necessarily. Ginnivan is someone that I think is a trap, and I probably wouldn't pick him. Played 100% forward. I think the week before he scored like a 50 or a 60. I should be able to figure that out easily if I click on this, right? He scored a 64. So, they've had back-to-back wins. The 119 was obviously great, but I just don't think that's the standard score you get out of Ginnivan. He had no clangers, for example, in the last game, which is going to be a rarity as well. When they start to lose games, or at least be in more competitive games, you are not going to see small forwards like that just that bust a big score. So Ginnivan's not someone I'd be considering, honestly. McCartan and Stevens definitely both worth getting. Bowie is an interesting one. Like, he seems like a really good correction option for Chapman. Not necessarily, but like I'm on the fence as to whether it's a good trade or not, because I don't think he, like Bowie, goes huge, like mental from what we've seen, right? So 151 is a crazy score. And the really positive thing is if you trade him in, he's going to have that in his rolling average for the next couple of price rises. He should make 100K very easily. But whether he can continue to average like a 80 kind of 60, 70, 80, or probably not 60, but like, yeah, 70, 80 average and kind of get up to that 150 plus range, I'm not sure that's happening. And I think that's where the difficult part is, because if he's not going to average enough to get to 150, even like plus 200K, like so low 400s, right? Someone like Chapman isn't going to be that far behind on his average and is going to make at least some money. So I just don't know if that trade is worth it. But going like if you don't have any other problems, it's just Chapman. I could see why you'd want to go aggressively for that, just because it does guarantee some price rise over the next couple of weeks, and then maybe could turn into an early upgrade. And then Horn Francis, I mean, the 98 and the rolling average makes it pretty hard to go past him, but I think a lot of people have him anyway. It was a very popular pick, 70%, I want to say. McCreary, I think it's a bit of a trap for the same reason talked about with Ginnivan. Nation, Rioli are both hard to pick. I mean, Rioli was one we were a little bit interested in the preseason, and he looked good if he just doesn't get suspended. I mean, he could have got easily suspended with the Rao tackle, and then he had another slam tackle where he drove, I think he drove LDU into the turf, which saw him come out of the game with concussion. But it wasn't like it was more unfortunate rather than it being a classically dangerous tackle. So I'm not sure if it gets looked at or not, but yeah, I thought like he's right on the line 2 weeks in a row. But yeah, I think it's really hard to trust the West Coast cash generators just because there's so many changes going on at the moment. I don't know what that team's going to look like next week. I don't know who's in and out. So, it makes it difficult to go for players like Hoff, Naish, any of those rookies. And then even someone like Rioli, who's a small forward, he's going to go up and down. And I don't think they're going to be competitive in that many games, especially once they start facing better teams. And that worries me for Rioli as well. And then Brody, I mentioned, like, what did he get? A 100? Was that what his score was? It was a 101 in the end. Oh, so a little bit of scaling there. So he had another like low 60s time on ground game where he only played 12 minutes, I want to say, of the last quarter. He has to have probably the highest points per minute or close to of anyone in the league, just because when he's on, he scores insane. And it makes it really confusing when there's no Fife for a few weeks. Obviously, they were out without Mundy, who should be coming back. I think that was just health and safety protocols. But clearly he can't go much more than 65% game time, which does limit his upside of how much he can burn me. Like, how many more tons he's going to put out with that low game time. But like, I mean, it was a much better pick than McGovern at this point. But yeah, this is tough. Davies played all right again, but I don't think he's a must-have by any means. I mean, he's still playing more small forward role. What was around 266? Wasn't even that good. Yeah, I think you can fade that. Dacos, yep, definitely everyone should have and already has. And then Newcomb didn't back up his round one. And then I don't think there's any of the other rookies that really need to be talked about. I mean, Hinge is good, but most people should have him. Otherwise, it's a weird one to be trading in now. And then McGuinness, I think there's a chance he gets dropped. And then Foley, yeah, he only scored 40. And then Foley, what was that, 63 after the 98 in round one. I think he's another one whose role's going to suffer. I mean, it already did suffer a bit with Witherden back, so yeah. So I think the must-haves, we've kind of talked to a little bit from the rookies in terms of premiums or mid prices that kind of have to come in. The ones you should be looking at are Heaney for the forward line. Maybe I'm a little bit out on Heaney still. I guess the problem with Heaney is that he has kicked 8 goals to prop up his score through those first 2 games. He's still playing predominantly forward. That could change when Papley comes back, but it's not meant to be till round 6. So I think it's just kind of been unfortunate that not owning Heaney has been this painful. But for me, wouldn't be a must-have over some of the others. I think the obvious options down back would be Hewitt for the cheaper option, a 400k price tag, and then for the premium option, Hall is, I think, really hard to go past just based on his scoring power, which is insane, but obviously comes with huge injury risk. So you got to weigh up whether that's valuable, like whether you want to go on that or not. And then like Tom Stewart, who got another 103, has been just consistent through the first 2. I guess he's not going to like escalate in price out of control, but he seems to be the safe premium defender to swap to if you're trying to get out of someone. In the midfield, people are going to ask a lot, is Rao must have? And is Cripps a must have? These are going to be probably the 2 biggest questions in the midfield. Because like presumably everyone's got Neil, for example. And I don't think you should be sidewaysing Steele to Took or Oliver to Took or anything like that. It's probably not advisable. So are Rao and Cripps must-haves? And so if you believe either Rao or Cripps will be a keeper, they are a must-have. If you don't think they'll end up being a keeper and you have to trade them out, neither of them will be must-haves, but they will probably make enough cash to make trading them in worthwhile if you've got someone else underperforming elsewhere. I think Rao can get to 500,000 pretty easily and probably go a bit more than that. And Cripps, I guess like maybe if you don't think Cripps is a keeper, then even trading him in now seems a bit sketchy. He should make 100k pretty quickly. It's a bit like Bowie. But then, yeah, if he's not a keeper, is he going to go to 600k from his price? Probably not. Yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, for me, it's just I've been killed by Cripps and Hewitt the first 2 weeks that not having them is a bit scary. But yeah, so I think the simple answer is Rowell and Cripps, if you believe they're keepers, they are must-haves. For Hewitt, if you believe he's a keeper, must-have. Otherwise, they are, I think only Rowell of those three is going to definitely make the 150k kind of mark. The other two are probably closer to 100, but they may go 150. And then, who am I missing? So forward line, it'll be Heaney, Brodie, Cherry. Cherry, I think, is a must-have. I think he is a must-have just because the break-even's so low. His price is great. If you've got McGovern but don't have Cherry, that's an easy correction. And then he's going to hopefully get that DPP in round 6. Well, he definitely should as long as he makes it there, which means he'll get that ruck swing as well. And so for someone like me that's running Wits, it could mean that I can trade out Wits and then play Cherry at R2 for a little bit or something like that. It gives lots of flexibility with the team. And then Heaney, yeah, so Heaney is going to be a keeper. He is going to be a top 6 forward. I'm pretty confident on these things. But is he going to price you out over the next 6 weeks, given that he's still playing predominantly forward? I don't think so. I could be wrong on this one. He's obviously playing phenomenally so far, and 8 goals in 2 games is nothing to scoff at. But just like law of averages, you'd expect some regression, which means maybe he is going to get to 550 pretty quickly, which is annoying because you could have got him at 450, but you're not going to be priced out. And maybe he has a poor game later on and you can get him at 500k and it's not that bad. So good option. Yes. Must have. I don't think so. And then Brodie is the other one that I'm tossing up. Is he a must have? And that's really hard to say because who knows what his role would be once Fife's back and how far away Fife is with his back now. And he's shown that, with the existing side, with Mundy back, he can score well. That's tough. I think it's a little bit of a luxury depending on what's going on with your team, what trades you need to make. I could imagine if you have, for example, McGovern and Cherry, and then you already had, say, Cripps and Hewitt, for example, which I don't have, then maybe just McGovern to Brodie as your only trade would make sense because even then, I think McGovern's going to make some money. Is trading to Brodie going to make you enough points in cash that it's worth a trade? I'm on the fence about that one at the moment. I must say I'm on the fence. But yeah, I think that's the quick overview of like the key players for mine this week. The other kind of question that goes hand in hand with this is who can you trade out, or who should you be trading out? So down back, I think the one that people are going to be talking about is Chapman. Let's have a look at Heath Chapman. Okay, I haven't set up my screen very well, so you're going to struggle to see this, I think. Let's just bring him up. So he scored a 56 after what was it? It was 80, but he obviously had the extra points the first round. Can I see his break even 25? So he'll make a little bit of cash this week, but not much. And I kind of don't expect him to make a lot, even though he did get pushed up to stoppages at some point, which was interesting. So can you trade him out? Yes, I think so. It'd be to Bowie or to Hewitt, and I think either of those would be fine. It's probably not the highest priority thing in the world, but yeah. The other two in the back line are going to be Ridley and Whitfield, who I unfortunately own both of, which people are going to be looking to trade out. So I think with Ridley, I think he is a trade out, which is pretty wild to say after you picked him as a premium and he just went on 100. In terms of what I saw in that game, I saw Ridley playing really well. He was contesting well, kicking well, spoiling, getting lots of those one percenters. But to me, and so a lot of the things that we thought would come true with Kelly kind of came true. Like Kelly was taking a lot of the matchups that are less desirable for Ridley for Supercoach scoring, freeing him up. But there were a couple of things that I saw which I didn't love. So firstly is in defensive stoppages, say someone like McCarthy pushed up to the stoppage, Ridley would go with him and be at the stoppage, which would be fine if Ridley was like a strong midfielder or had that background. He's not really. And so at that stoppage, you might say have Neil win the ball and bomb it to the square. And that means that Ridley's stuck at the stoppage rather than at the square, which has two effects. One, he might miss a kick in if it goes through for behind. But secondly, he's not there to get intercept marks or spoils, which I think is probably a net loss to his score, even though you'd imagine that putting someone at stoppages is a good thing. And then the second thing is Essendon's game plan for me just looks like it's changed when it comes to exiting defense. And this isn't just from kick-ins, this is just exiting defense in general. They want to go pretty direct and pretty quick. So there is almost no switch-up play or any possession play in the back half from what I've seen in the first 2 weeks. And that is a worry because some of these other defender options that we really like, so Short, Rich, Stewart, Crisp to a certain extent, these type of players, they get lots of, and Lloyd is like the king of this, and Hall, of course, Hall. They get lots of cheap touches as players being swapped, so they get marks, they get kicks, so this type of thing, and then exited back out. And Essendon's just not doing this as part of their game plan at the moment. Now, that could change, which doesn't mean that you have to trade Ridley by any means, but I think he is someone that you could change just based on how unlikable the first 2 games were. And then Whitfield, kind of touched on it a little bit already. I'm not sure what's going on here. It looks like there's some underlying problem. We obviously had him walking around funny week 1 with the groin. To my eyes, he looks less fit, just like his body shape compared to what we've seen him in the past. He doesn't look as lean as what I've seen him. And it's just interesting that he said that he is the fittest he's ever been this preseason, feeling really good. Like, these conflicting statements is odd. He had high time on ground, which suggests that he is running at games and going well, but then you have him doubled over and some of his efforts don't look like the Whitfield of old. So this is like a really tough one as well. I could see Whitfield and Ridley both being traded out of teams that had everything else right, and like those are the only problems, and you move them on. So yeah, I think I'd be fine with trading either one or both, depending on your team situation. Berry is one that people have been toying with. Should I trade Berry? And that's because if they want to get to Cripps or Rao, then that's usually the easiest one in the midfield to kind of move on. I don't think he's a particularly great option. I should be able to, if I swap this right. So Ridley's got a 144 break even, Whitfield's got a 151 break even. Not that that matters too much for keepers, just because you're going to keep them anyway. But I guess the problem is if you don't trade them this week and then go to do it next, you could be wearing a 20k loss, which makes things substantially more difficult. Berry's got that 14 break even, so nothing, like, he'll definitely make it this week. We are going to need to see some 80s and some higher scores from him to kind of have him make that money. They're up against North this week, which is another opportunity for him to score some good points. I think he's perfectly fine hold, and that's probably my preference. I would imagine most teams have bigger problems than Berry, but if he's their only problem, then by all means go for it. For me personally, like McGovern, much bigger problem. His break even would be even higher, 40. So I don't know why you would trade out Berry if you had like a McGovern, for example, which isn't that common of a pick, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I just think, like some teams had Gresham. I'd rather trade Gresham than Berry, for example, as well. And then the other really big one is Gawn, who I don't have. And the whole reason why I didn't start Gawn is because he was going to bleed money. He wasn't valued at his price. Been saying it all preseason. He was safe. He should score well. He should still be around the top 3 ruck mark, but he is going to lose money. Now, he is break even is 204, which is astronomical. I didn't look at the players with the highest break evens, but he would have to be right up there, right? Tom Mitchell's the only one that's bigger. You could move on for him for sure. Yeah, Gawn's right up there. Wow, Steels is that high too. So Steele, someone I probably wouldn't move on, but people are going to be asking the question. But Gawn, I think I'm not even sure I'd move on from Gawn really. The problem with Gawn is who do you go to? Who do you go to? Darcy got injured. You can't go there. Uh, I mean, and Darcy, by the way, had holds if he gets up for this week. If he doesn't, you probably trade him on. It depends on whether you can loop Pollen with Hayes, actually, but I digress. Gawn, I think you can trade on. But it's just like to who? Because I mean, I'm carrying Wits. That's probably the best option in terms of who's going to make money. But I don't love it. And as a Wits owner, I'm planning to trade back to Max Gawn anyway. So if you already have Max Gawn, you've got to trade out him out, make money now, hope that the money you make up with Wits is enough that when you trade back to Gawn at the lower price, that kind of makes your two trades worthwhile. And then whatever you free up now, you utilize it well in your team, right? Because Gawn to Wits is 270k, roughly, give or take. So you've got to be using it 270k effectively now, which I assume for a lot of people is like Gawn to Wits, Berry, McGovern, someone like that, up to Cripps, or it'll be Chapman up to Hewitt. And those trades are good. I think that is a good use of the money. So if you go down that path, I'm not against it by any means. But yeah, that's just the stuff you have to weigh up if you're going to trade out Gawn. Like his scoring has definitely been worse than what you would have hoped when paying for it. But he is still the safe ruck option that is probably going to end up being the one that we want back in our team anyway. So if you have bigger issues, I think holding on to Gawn is fine. If you want to get aggressive, trading him is also fine, but it comes with those risks, and that's what you need to trade off with. And you really need to make sure that money's being put to good use. And then I think that's everyone. I mean, Steele, we talked about where would you go if you don't have Neil? That's like just obviously. If you don't have Took, I guess so. But it's still like, it's not really worth a trade, I don't think. Especially if Steele bounce back. I guess it just comes down to how much faith you have in Steele bouncing back. Saints have been pretty rubbish so far, so you'd probably be hoping some return to form from them. Walsh didn't have a great game back, which hopefully takes him a few games to warm up. We get him a little bit cheaper. He'd be one of the first upgrade targets we look for if that's the case. And then, yeah, I mean, Crisp and Ridley still have high break evens. Crisp, I think, is probably fine to hold. He's going to be up and down, by the way. I still don't love that pick, but it's going to be fine to hold. All right, so I think that kind of covers who are the trading targets, who can you trade out. And then I've gone into this a little bit in terms of like what trades should you do. But for me, it comes down to, once again, and I'll just reiterate this, prioritizing cash generation, making sure that is under lock and key, because that's what's going to drive your team going forward. Then I'd be focusing on my correction trades, some of the ones we talked about, potentially like a Gawn, if you wanted to trade him out, or Ridley or Whitfield for me. And you in those trades, you're either trying to make up the cash value or make up points, or both. And if you're sidewaysing to another premium, you want to make sure they're a keeper as well. You probably don't want to be going to speculative picks, preferably. And then finally, don't jack up your structure just to force these sideways trades in. I know a lot of people are going to be trading this week, and it's going to want you to be sucked into that hype too. And like, I want to do trades. I want to get active as well. But if you have to stuff up your structure quite badly to make those happen, I'm against those trades. I don't love doing that. Especially if it makes you feel weird plays and weird positions, these types of things. I wouldn't do it. I'd shy away from those things. So for example, if you're forcing a trade just to move on Berry, who I don't think is a must trade, I don't love that stuff personally, unless you were really out on Berry for whatever reason. And so that's the final tip, which is don't jack up your structure. Don't muck around and make your structure much worse just by forcing a couple of trades this week. I think that's the worst thing you can do in the situation. So yeah, that'd be the final bit of advice. All right, so going into the game-by-game reviews, we'll try and get through these pretty quickly. So we started the week with Dogs Blues, definitely an upset in my mind. Did not think the Blues would get over the Dogs whatsoever. We saw some great performances on the Blue side, and obviously it was great to have Walsh back as well. Cripps was really good again. He still can't kick a ball amazingly by any means. but did lots of other stuff to score well. Hewitt was great. He was a handball merchant and a half in this game, which held back his scoring from being something much better. I think the detractors of Hewitt will still say that, yes, Walsh was back this week, but you didn't have Chera, and Walsh wasn't playing his back. So Walsh wasn't playing his best. So once you have Chera back, Walsh playing his best, does Hewitt still get first or second most CBAs? I think he offers something that midfield has been missing for a long time, especially on the defensive side. And I think he's a good user by foot. When he does kick, I really like what he does. I think he's a good decision maker. I would be surprised if they took too many CBAs away from him. I think he's going to get good time. And at the same time, like, Kennedy's been good, so I can see why they wouldn't want to take too much away from him. But I think Hewitt's played well and is a good pick. Kurnow was one that popped up this week. We had been talking about the preseason, but then had knee problems. Didn't work well without McKay. And then he missed he missed the Amy game. Was that what happened? Or he just scored poorly. But yeah, he's come back on with a huge score this week. He's a key forward. It's going to be up and down. If you started him, great, which would be rare. Wouldn't go chasing this score by any means. Doherty actually put together another performance as well, which is really interesting. I mean, this is obviously 2 Blues wins, so you've got all of them scoring really well. This isn't going to continue forever. But could Doherty become a top 6 defender this year is actually pretty interesting. He has played well in the 2 games they've seen so far. On the Blues, Dog side. Oh, I'm clearly getting tired. Clearly getting tired. All right. So on the Dog side, so Libba was back into the midfield a bit more, but then also supplemented with goals. Bont, is just off. If you started Bont, this is not going well. Treloar had a good game again. He's been pretty impressive so far the first 2 weeks. It's just the soft tissue injuries holding him back. And then McRae was great. We'll kind of talk about how unfortunate it was for anyone that took his VC score. Dale was good without being, amazing. I think if you picked him, still not a great option as a defender. Ed Richards, my boy, I think that looks like a bit of a fade. If for whatever reason you did have him, I think you can get off of him now as an option. McGovern, we've talked about how disappointing that was with the positioning and just why he's not being used. I think it's going to lead to some very high variant scoring from McGovern, and probably one that you can move on from. And then Durden, disappointing, but the job security, I believe, is still there. So, I think just hold on to him. I probably wouldn't go chasing after him to get him into your side this week is a must-have. I need to move this around. I have not set this up well at all. I'm sorry. Maybe if I... here we go. That should be a bit better. All right. So, game I was at, cracking game for one reason alone, and that was Buddy kicking 1,000 goals. But it was very impressive to see a lot of the midfielders. So Mills stood out, but I thought Warner was amazing. I'm really impressed by what I'm seeing by Warner, and he's someone that we had as a rookie last year, and I could honestly see him coming back to us as a premium at some point in the future where we actually consider him. Heaney was very good, but he kicked 5 goals was it? So score obviously boosted by that in the win. Lloyd, I'm surprised he got to 102 because honestly, invisible for a lot of the game. And then I checked the scores at the end of the leaving, and I was like, how did he get to 102? I honestly have no idea. Must have been a lot of touches at the end of the ground we weren't at. And then Goulden was good, but not really Supercoach relevant. Who else is Supercoach relevant? Blakey. So we saw him score 98 last week. Lloyd coming back has affected him a bit in terms of kick-ins, exiting from defense, but still looks really good. He's prone just to making silly mistakes, which is going to hurt his ceiling as well because you get those clangers kind of in there. But I liked what I saw from Blakey. If you started him, I think he's been a good selection so far and should continue to be so. Not someone I'd be getting out of in terms of trading. On the Cat side, Stewart, like everything for them down defense, does some great stuff, can just go for missing for little parts of the game, which is what hurts his score. Duncan was back, didn't do much. And then there's really not too much relevant from the Hawk side. Stengel, who I think people were talking about as a trade-in option, and Holmes, who some people had started or looked at as a trade-in option, both crashing back to earth. Same with Hawkins, the plight of a key forward, especially in a losing side. And then Danger just wasn't nearly himself this week. Really nothing else to discuss here. All right. Collingwood against Crows. I thought this was going to be closer. And then Collingwood looked pretty good for the most part. I think disappointing on the Collingwood side was probably Dacos and Lipinski. Outside of that, all the plays that were relevant pretty much scored well. DeGoey was one of the lowest scoring premiums in 95, still great. And then we saw, Chris with the 121, which will please a lot of those with the bounce back. Gideon, kind of already mentioned, I think is a bit of a trap. And then Grundy, I didn't even really touch on Grundy when I did my own team review, but just the 101 in the end. He had a goal. This wasn't like an amazing score, but just given what's happened with the rest of the ruck carnage, I think we'll count our blessings when it comes to Grundy. On the Crow side, Keys has gone huge in back-to-back weeks. Can he keep it up? I don't know. I mean, it's really interesting because there was talk about him playing more half forward with Laird in the side and whatnot, but now he's, right in that engine room and he's doing a cracking job. So, to those that started him, well done. I wonder if I can easily check ownership. I can't. 3 people traded him in last week or have already traded him this week. I'm not sure what that is, but cracking. And then, Dawson we've already touched on. So huge for 3 quarters. Poor first quarter, held back by clangers, but I think this is going to work out as a good pick. I liked what I've seen from him. Hinge was really good. Yeah, really good. So I did think we would see 80s from him just based on some of the previous games he had for the limited game time. So this is really promising, especially in a loss as well, to be able to score 84. This is really nice. So McCartan and Hinge, I think, are going to be every week on-field options, kind of depending on what the matchup is and who they're facing, which is, that's good. That's good. Just on the Cat side, obviously, like SDK, DeConning didn't play because of concussion. She'll be back this week. And we talked about Rochelle already. It's going to be up and down. Sligo was the disappointing one. Was the sub, came on, just scored the 7. For those in the Discord, you did get a ping as soon as we found out about that, warning you to not use him as a loophole for Stephen's score and to not use him as a loophole for McRae's score. For those that unfortunately got stuck with that on the bench or missed out on that, that's unfortunate for you. That's really, really unlucky. Essendon Lions, another poor. Well, at least Essendon showed up for 1 quarter this week, but the Neil's good score I saw coming. That good I did not. Rich took a lot of the ball out of defense. I haven't seen the kicking numbers yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was near everything for the Lions. I don't remember anyone else apart from maybe Zorko down back. Zorko scored well again, by the way, and I think he's on track to get that defender status as long as he continues to play games, which throws a spanner in the works because he could be a relevant defender. Who else on the line side's worth talking about? Barry, we've already gone over a fair bit. Tagged basically from 5 minutes into the second quarter, Merritt for the rest of the game, and I think that probably helped his score rather than hurt it. On Essendon's side, Merritt's syndesmosis out for 2 months, which is somewhat interesting to think about how that affects the rest of the side. Is it going to help Parrish? Is Caldwell, who's had back-to-back 90s, going to get more mid-time, which should help his scoring? I think that's likely. It's pretty probable that Caldwell's the better mid-price option than Berry was at 260k, as long as he stays fit with what we know 2 weeks in. Definitely a little bit of a surprise on that one, but with Merritt going down, I think that's pretty promising unless we decide to bring in and debut Hobbs on the inside so Caldwell holds his current spot, in which case I retract the statement. Ridley mentioned already Essendon's game plan, how we're exiting defense. I don't think it's going to help him. I am not optimistic we see too many more scores like this. And you can also see it hurting like other defenders. So Hind, Redmond, Heppel, McGrath as well, like all these defending options. It's not that there's, too many players that we want exiting and, trying to get it to them and whatever. It's just that there's no sharing in the back line. It's straight out. So all of their scores are down across the board. It's wild. I just don't think this is Supercoach friendly. It could change. We've lost 2 games in a row pretty badly. So maybe we do fiddle around with what happens in defense, but are you going to wait around to find out if that happens? It's pretty speculative. I don't know if you can. And then, we already touched on Martin, who should be back next week. Baldwin played all right in the seconds. I think he kicked at least 3 goals from the last update I scored, so it could have been more than that. But It's hard. He could come. This is so frustrating with trading Baldwin out. He could come back in for Francis. Francis tried, but he's I think 0-7 in front of goals for his last 7 shots. He just hasn't converted one. He's really not that much of a threat up there. So I don't know, man. I don't know. Baldwin could come back in this week. I'd watch team sheets on that one. Port, Hawks, this was another surprise this week. There's actually a few surprises this week. And yeah, Hawks not only winning, but really dominating Port was a surprise to me. Butters and Boak were both great on the Port side. And there's really no one else Supercoach. I mean, even Boak's not much. Houston actually backed up with an okay score. I think he was tracking a lot worse than this for a lot of the game. But yeah, the 93, not too bad for those that started him, which would be very few. Skinner and Sin debuted, and then Mead was the sub, which is unfortunate for those who had Mead because he did come on and score just the 18, which is going to hurt his cash gen. Sin wasn't great, the 24 from a Supercoach perspective, and Skinner was a little bit better and at least has the job security. So obviously I wouldn't be trading in any of these plays this week. Skinner, we can wait another week, and even with Sin to see if they've got job security, which we think should be the case for Skinner, and then whether or not they can score better. But even if Skinner does come up, who are you trading out to get to him? I just don't know, like realistically, if that's a good option for anyone. I think it's going to be one that we kind of want, but we're going to end up missing. You could get him into forward line if like an injury happens or something, but yeah, I don't know. And then on the Hawk side, Fillmore was good. It's actually interesting, like they won, but the Supercoach scoring, they only had 2 over 100. Sicily 84. There's actually like okay score for the price you paid for him. I don't think he's going to hurt non-owners, but I don't think he's going to necessarily fail terribly for owners. So yeah, like just wasn't as good as last week. Mitchell not great. We heard about the groin thing in the preseason, which is just the red flag, the thing big sign to jump off. Newcomb came crashing down to earth a bit. McDonald and Ward we touched on were good. I think probably hold their spots. McGuinness is the one that might lose it, but yeah. Okay. Ooh. Gold Coast against Melbourne. My boys in Miller, Witts and Rao, they started so well. I think they were on 130 at quarter time and even 180 at halftime, and then petered out a little bit from there. But yeah, I mean, Miller was insane. He's just run so hard. He works so hard for it. And then Witts was good, but against Jackson and Gone kind of get worn down eventually. And then Raul, was good for that first quarter and then petered out a bit. So I'm just not sure if that's a matchup specific thing that went on there. If it was the defensive work that the D's are putting into him and whether or not this persists into future games, like whether other teams start doing the same. I don't think it will, but yeah, I guess it's a little bit of a warning sign. No one else relevant from Gold Coast. And then for Demons, I mean, Bowie, like this 151's nutso. There's no way he was better than like Took or Petrarca or whatever. But yeah, I mean, stats and the way champion data work don't always mean that the players that are going to get 3 Brownlow votes are the ones at the top. Not that that's necessarily the best metric for that stuff either. But yeah, really good score for his rolling average. He's obviously negative break even now and presents as an okay option. I just think we saw him without Salem last week and he only put up, 40 or 50 or 60 points. So I think this is more of a once in a blue moon rather than what you expect to see from Bowie, and he comes back to more like that 60 to 70 point average over the next few games. But we'll see. I mean, they come up against Essendon this week, and that could be a murder. Jackson looked really good and actually took a lot more of the ruck time and middle time from Gawn this week than what we saw in the first week, which is got to be worrying for Gawn owners because that's the thing you're most worried about, which is Jackson playing more on the midfield, doing more of those rucks. And I don't know if it's just because Witts is a bigger body ruck, and so they wanted to share that a little bit more. But I mean, Gawn had the same problem we saw last year where he just dropped so many marks as well, which really held his score back. Last week it was the freeze against. This week it was dropping the marks. These could be much better scores than what we've seen. Oliver bounced back, which is good for owners. Petrarca was good again, but just a bit of a butcher. I mean, that's a score. It could have been much bigger if he was clean with the ball, a bit like what we saw with Crisp. In terms of other relevance, I don't think there really is on the D side. And then North versus West Coast, pretty ugly game to be honest. And I'm surprised it was close as what it was, just given the number of top ups. It was 14 missing players for West Coast. I don't know how many debutants they had. In the Supercoach scoring originally, they didn't even have a lot of these players just in here because they weren't in the system. So yeah, it was pretty funny. Cherry was a standout, and Hall was really good again too. Zeebel's gone all right in continuous games as well. Actually, he'd be right up there again. Yeah, wow, 118.5 average for the first 2 games, but just hard one to pick because of his injury history. Same thing with Hall, but Hall has the better upside than Zeebel does. On the north side, we've touched on Cherry, touched on Horn Francis. McDonald was one that people were looking at as a 350k option after his big score last week. But yeah, we kind of identified last week it relied quite heavily on intercept marks, which he got. He did a lot of intercepting again this week, but it's just hard to consistently score really high with some of those things. And wasn't getting as much of the free play behind the ball. He still looked good. I just don't think he's a great 350k option. I wouldn't be picking him over Rao, for example. And I wouldn't have him ahead of someone like Cripps either. But he will get defensive eligible status eventually. But I mean, Hall and Zeeble are probably both preferred options than McDonald as keepers. It's just that he's much cheaper at the moment. Really, we touched on good score but wouldn't go near. Naish, we touched on good score but wouldn't go near. I mean, maybe if you have absolutely nothing wrong with your team, Naish is not the worst option. But yeah, for most people, I don't think it's realistic. Foley, we touched on, didn't back up his massive score. If you already have him, it's fine. I don't think I'd go trading him in now, especially when Bowie's there with a lower break even for the next couple of rounds. More guarantee around making money, and job security is better as well. I think that's about it to talk about from that game. Richmond versus GWS. Another upset. A lot of upsets this round. It's a good thing I don't tip, just based on how many times I said upset this video so far. I don't think I would have done very well. Short was nuts. He started on fire, and yeah, just the kick-ins and the Yusuru halfback. This is much more like what we were going to expect. He played poorly last week and got to a 106, and I think he played really well this week in the 136. So yeah, expecting hopefully more scores like this from Short, but he's also very, very highly owned. So it's not like these big scores push me really far ahead in ranks or anything like that. Ralph Smith was good. It's actually a shame that he was a sub first week rather than named, because it's someone that a lot of us would have looked at as an option, but probably a bit hard to bring in now. Like I would have Cherry and Brody ahead of him still as options. So yeah, I don't think he can, but it would have been a fun one to start. He's good watching. Kicked a great goal this game. But he's also one that's prone, a little bit like Blakey, where he's a bit of an excitement machine coming off half back, but still, I mean, for him, it's more that he's a little bit raw and he kind of butchers the ball a bit sometimes, or just makes poor decisions sometimes, but I think he's going to be a good player. And then only other really relevant one is Gibkiss, who's pretty highly owned for those that wanted to run a lighter defense. If they didn't want the Chapman option, they went Gibkiss for rookies. And yeah, unfortunately, he's doing, I guess, a little bit of what we expected, which is just not score very well. So he's going to struggle. He's going to be very slow burn. He's just there for job security. I wouldn't go about fixing him because there's really no one you can fix him to. Yeah, just let him slow burn, and hopefully he does what Jordan Butts did last year, spike a couple of big games. Really, it's his cash gen going, and you can trade him out for a nice price. Kelly did well from a Supercoach perspective for those that have him, which wouldn't be that many. And then Green did well again. So he had a big score last week. Can I have a look at what that is? It was a 164 and then backed up with a 103, was it? I was just on there. I should remember. 106. So yeah, like 2 good scores back to back from Green, but he is at the same price as Cripps, right? 430, very similar. I would just have Cripps ahead of him. Cripps has got this proven scoring premium history. GWS has Leon Cameron as a coach. So yeah, that's a pretty easy decision for me. And then yeah, Cogs did well. Taranto, probably a little bit close to what we expected with him playing more forward until Green returns. And then Whitfield, disappointing. We've already gone over that a little bit. I still don't know what to do with him. Is there anyone else relevant in these teams? I don't think so. Pretty quick to go through. And then last game of the round, Freo versus Saints. But being Brayshaw was immense. I mean, for those that follow me on Twitter, you know I chucked together a fantasy team in like 5 minutes, and I have Brayshaw on that. He went off this week, so I'm like ranked 350th ish overall at the moment. And yeah, Brayshaw, big help in that format, and he was really good today. Not only from the racking it up on the fantasy side, but from Supercoach and actual football perspective, he was clearly the best on ground for me, and almost did enough to bring them back into the game against the Saints side, which to me still looked very lackluster, and I wasn't very impressed with what I saw from them. Marshall had a down game, which is, I guess, like somewhat easy to rationalize with Meek and Darcy being two pretty tough opponents, but to be outscored by Hayes again this week is somewhat surprising. Yeah, and that hurts for those that picked him. He'll come good, I think, but if Ryder comes back into the side and they're playing Hayes, Marshall, and Ryder, I don't know. I think short term that's going to hurt a little bit. Yeah, that could hurt a lot. Saints had Wangari Malira debut, and his foot skills are great. I think his decision making is pretty good. He's still very slight of frame. He's a 164-ish K option down back. If he plays really well again next week and he looks like he's getting some job security, I guess for those who have Gibgis, that is a potential trade-out option if Skinner doesn't present itself as one and you do want to get off that pick. But yeah, I'd make that decision next week. I wouldn't be moving on Gibgis necessarily now. O'Driscoll was the sub for Freo, came on, kicked a goal, didn't score much. I think some started him as a loophole, and it's unlucky that you got rewarded with him actually getting some game time. But who knows if he plays again next week, especially with Mundy back. I think that might be an easy drop. Brody was good. We touched on Young. Started him last year, and he was going to be such a good pick until the hamstring. Anyway, that's annoying. It would have really helped last year. Thanks, Young. And then Ryan rewarded those who took him, but this is something we somewhat expected. He scored poorly last week, huge this week. He's going to be up and down. I think he's going to be inconsistent. And then he's obviously always had injury problems as well. Darcy didn't have a great game, was still scoring all right, but then had problems with his knee or like his ankle. Came off, tried to get it going, but just at the three-quarter huddle, they called him for the game. I don't know if it's severe enough that he won't play next week or what's going on, but this is very Darcy-esque. So, yeah, I think if he is injured, you can trade him out. If not, you can probably hang on to him and just ride the roller coaster. It's what you signed up for. It's what I was going to sign up for. And then, yeah, Chapman talked about, I thought he was pretty average. Got into the game late again, which seems to be his MO, and that's not great unless the game's on the line. You know, this game was thankfully close, same with last week, but if you're going to get into the game in the fourth quarter and it's already over, then you scored nothing, so that's not good. Steele, it was a 111 in the end. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I'd be trading Steele. Who have they got this week? Richmond? That should be an alright matchup. Richmond tends to bleed points in the midfield. I think I'd hang on to Steele. I don't know if I'd be trading despite the high break even. Hayes we talked about, Marsh we talked about. I don't think there's anyone else relevant here to talk about. So that is all the teams we've got through them. And then all that's really left is to go through, I guess, what I'm doing with my team this week. So my trades and how I'm going to set up captain, vice captain, these types of things. So trades. And this is going to reveal why I wanted to bank cash last week and do the Hayes to Martin one. So I could do, refreshing. So I could do these two trades. So it was going to be, can I get Rochelle into the forward line, please? It's not working. Hello, Supercoach, please. Let's try again. Why won't it let me do the swap? Let's go all the way out and go all the back in. This is very anticlimactic. Oh, terrible. All right, swap. Yay. Let's go. Okay. So I wanted to make sure I had enough cash that I could do, no, you into defense, and I could get Hewitt and Cripps, which doing those trades last week meant that I like calculated how much, and it didn't matter which mid pricer I traded at, even my cheapest ones, kind of in like McGovern or Berry, like this would work, as well as then being able to trade out my cheapest defender primo in Ridley. I mean, I didn't expect Whitfield would flop, so it doesn't cover Whitfield in that situation. But yeah, I'd be able to do this trade this week, and not have to trade boost and not have to like really kind of compromise too much to make this happen. So this is the planned trade this week. I guess the only other option for me is if I wanted to trade out Whitfield, which I can't actually now. There's no one else that's a good option for this price. So I don't think that's really viable. Or I could get Brody in, which I don't even know who I would go for. So like, is Berry to Brody worth it? I don't think so. So yeah, this would be the team. Now, what I don't love about this is I have gone now. I've ended up quite thin in the forward line. So I'm running 2 of Rochelle, Hayes, and Martin every week. I don't think Durden's an on-field option at the moment. Even against the Hawks this week, I can't see myself doing that. Martin against the D's, he showed that he can score really well last week. Don't love it. Crows are against Port. I don't necessarily love that matchup. And then Hayes are against Saints, which I think is pretty good matchup. So I'd probably lean towards this at the moment and then swap the emergency to Rochelle. We have to think through that though. But yeah, I think that's the setup in the forward line. Chuck the E there for now. In the midfield, not going to change this. Stevens would have the E. They play the Dogs, which is an amazing matchup. Hawks play Carlton, as we kind of discussed, and normally like that's a good matchup, but Carlton's been strong this year, so I don't know if I'm going that. And then in defense, yes, do I go Hinge against Port or McCartan against the Dogs? I'm probably still I'm more of a believer in the Dogs than I am Port, I guess. So I might just leave this as is for now. McCartan was really good, by the way. He took 5 intercept marks in the first quarter, I think it was. It just petered out a little bit, but I was really impressed by him. I think he does a really good job. So yeah, I think this is the trades for the week. I can't see myself doing anything else. I don't think Brody's enough of a must-have that I would make another trade. And if I was trading Crisp out this week, say he really dudded, I could have used a boost and put him to Hall. I think that would have been reasonable. My only other option, so if I undo, I'll just show you the other thing that I'm considering. So it would be Ridley to Hall. And so this way I miss Hewitt. And so the reason why you do this is because you may not be convinced Hewitt's going to be a top 6 premium, but Hall definitely is as long as his health holds up. So that's really easy. And then I would trade McGovern to Brody in this situation. So the nice thing about this is I get a definite keeper and a definite cash cow that's going to make money as long as Brody holds his job. So this is probably a little bit safer than the Hewitt Cripps one, but I guess the Hewitt Cripps one ends up being much better if Cripps and Hewitt are both keepers. And so that's the trade-off here. I think I am going to do the Cripps Hewitt one, but I might go back and forth on this a little bit. See what some people that are better than me at Supercoach say. Or at least get the wisdom of the crowd on my side before I make this decision. All right, so I'm going to have to reset everything I just went through, didn't I? Although I don't think I changed much apart from this forward line. So Martin on, Rochelle off. Good. Oh, that happened. And then Rochelle with the E. I don't know. He could go off in a showdown game. I'm pretty nervous about not starting Rochelle here. And then... captain, vice captain. So it doesn't look like I've got a loophole unless Dixon gets dropped. If Dixon gets dropped, world's my oyster. I can do anything. In terms of matchups I think Took v Neil C looks pretty safe this week. Neil has North, who have not been particularly great, and with LDU likely out for the week, I would imagine. And they lost someone else in their midfield too. I can't remember who that was. Was it in their midfield or was it somewhere else? North had injury problems this week. That's just disaster, that game. So yeah, Neil could go huge again. I guess the thing is North's going to be a little bit more wary and maybe game plan for that. They've got obviously Greenwood that they could put, someone could do some like, put some defensive work into him. They've got others that they could potentially do that with as well. So like, yeah. And then Took against GWS. I actually need to check what his history was to know if it's good or not. Otherwise, McRae against Swans is, I think, a very safe Thursday night choice. The bold one would be Cripps against Hawthorn, but I would only do that as a vice captain. I wouldn't do it as a captain option. So I think like Neil's just the safer captain, even though this could plan out. Yeah, and that would be it. Maybe Butters as a sneaky vice captain. If you have Oliver against Essendon, I think that's a pretty good vice captain option this week as well. So that is everything. This has been a mammoth recording. It's well over an hour, I'm sure now. Oh God, it's quite late too. This is going to be another night where I don't get to go to sleep early to try and get this out quickly, so it's relevant for the week ahead and hopefully helps you guys. But yeah, let me know what you think of the trades, the content. Let me know how you're traveling, what you're weighing up. I'll try and answer as many questions as I can get to, and I'll see you all in the next one. Thanks for spending the hour with me. Peace.